All right, good afternoon, folks. Welcome to our September Garden Talk, a year in the life of a garden with Lynette Silverling. Lynette's been a Master Gardener for quite a few years now, so she has a lovely small city lot, and today she's going to talk to you about how her garden changes over the course of the year. All right, Lynette, we've got to get rid of this. Okay. All right, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. As Jan said, I have a very small garden in the city, and it goes through quite a few changes during the year due to reasons like seasonal changes and downsizing, maintenance issues, excuse me, family priorities, garden trends and knowledge, friendships and sharing plants. Sometimes we change because of tree and shrub growth or tree removal. Excuse me, I've got a little allergy thing going on. And some of the problems we have are weeds, which cause the survival of the fittest plants for us. But the biggest reason my garden changes, I think, is because I like to change.
Nope, you're good.
A little history of my garden. I started 20 years ago when I moved into my tiny house. I literally don't have any land to speak of, but I do have space around my house, and I utilize all that for the garden. And back in the day when my grandkids were little and I babysat them, and for something to do to entertain them all day, we gardened. I learned how to garden at the same time that my kids took a shovel in hand, and they loved it. And so during the day when I had them, we gardened. This is one of my grandsons, who is a little junior master gardener today. He's 16 years old now, but he loves to garden. And one day when he was done planting a bleeding heart, and we did some rockery around the yard, he sat down and painted a picture of it. I think he was probably about 3 or 4 years old back then. But that's how we started many years ago in this little tiny garden. Excuse me again. These are a couple of their gardens that they built. I have 5 grandchildren, and they all participated in building these little gardens around the house while I babysat them. The guy up in the right-hand corner is my Sawyer, and he calls this area his jungle, and he planted these plants. And the little fella down in the lower left-hand corner is now on a varsity football team, but he was my maintenance man, and if he could have a pair of shears in his hand, everything got caught and maintained. But they loved it. My granddaughters are gone to college, and I have a 3rd grandchild now entering college. So I have these 2 fellas left, and they still help me in the garden. Excuse me. So this is where it all begins, my year in the garden. We start with winter. When I planted this garden years ago, I had structure and framework in mind. I saw some pictures on TV and in books about how people design gardens, and this one took my fancy the most. I really like the framework. I'm all about the even Steven thing, and the odd number. So in this beginning, we have some hydrangeas and a couple of Japanese maples to start the framework, and in the center, I had some. It's changed so much. I've had a Japanese maple in the front, in the middle, to balance everything out. But that's where we start in the winter, and a lot of structure. We can see the structure of these shrubs in the winter, and I leave the buds on the hydrangeas. So we have some winter interest, especially when the snow hits them. This is the back of my house. Like I say, very, very small area. Up to the fence, this is what I garden. This is the west side of my house. Years ago when I started it, I planted these evergreen trees on each side of this fence. Excuse me. And that began my framework. To the left of it is a little Japanese maple. And again, it's for in the winter interest. I go for the structure. I love to see the branches and how the trees and plants are progressing through the years. Then we have lady on the right is a hydrangea. And I went with the paniculatas because of the danger and the what they go through in the winter with ice and snow. Being so close to the neighbor's house, ice falls on them, ice forms on them, and it doesn't harm them because they flower on the New Year's growth. They're a very woody plant compared to the mop heads. The macrophyllus, where they can't take this kind of surroundings. So I went with the paniculatas because of their woodiness and they can hold up in the winter and still give us something nice to look at, even when they're full of ice. Excuse me. This is another side of my backyard. My little doggie back there trying to find some place to hang out, but it's all full of snow. And it's a place where, as they say, the snow lies the longest in the spring. And it's a very damp area in the spring. But it's winter interest again. I put a little blue chair there for something pretty to look at and give a little color in the winter. But this is where my structure and framework starts, is with these trees. I have an arbor that we built from the kids' old bunk beds. I think you can say they painted their names on at one time. But we use this in the garden. We use everything that we can. And this is the beginning of my garden after the snow melts. This is just a little part of it that we all had a hand in making. Then spring comes around. It's finally here. Winter is leaving us. And even though these plants will come up through the snow and ice, they've done a beautiful, beautiful show. The hellebores, excuse me, little scillas and the snowdrops, the crocuses, they all pop up so nice everywhere. And then they start to give us a nice show. Spring is here. And next we have the tulips and I've got some Virginia bluebells that pop up. They come up on their own, a little surprise. And then when they're done blooming, they kind of fade away on their own. And so you have to remember where they are during the rest of the summer, because once they're gone, you don't see any foliage anymore, and you have to be careful where you're planting. We have daffodils and jonquils. And down below, we have the violas. They're popping around. In the front of my house, I have a flowering crabapple in the spring. She's amazing color. The birds love to be in it. And it's just color. It's a beautiful, beautiful tree. I love it. And that's our spring. And it's right outside my front window facing the street. So I have a beautiful view out my window all year round. And then we're going to go into the later spring. Things like the clematises start to pop up and the delphiniums. I have a false forget-me-not up in the right-hand corner. She gives a nice show with the leaves and flowers quite a bit through the summer. The bottom picture is part of the new garden that I started in the fall due to losing some trees. And we'll get into that a little while. Next, we have the summer coming up. The coneflowers have arrived. Part of my garden change in the fall, when we go to the greenhouse and they have all those nice little things for sale, those little 4-packs for $1, I buy them up and plant them. And then in next year, when they start to grow, I'll call Jan and say, oh my gosh, what is this growing? And she'll say, well, what'd you put back there? And I say, I can't remember, but I'll send her a picture of a leaf. She goes, oh my God, they're coneflowers. They're everywhere. They came up through this year like nobody's business. And this is proof. We have some Henry Eichler up in the top corner, some little pink ones along the way. Those were a 4-pack. They are everywhere. And we have the little brown-eyed Susans, but the birds helped me plant those. And on the far right is a white coneflower. she spread nicely too. So when I plant in the fall, it's kind of like a trial garden to see what's actually going to make it through the winter, the spring, the mushy ground back there. I'll tell you, this summer has been one heck of a show. Excuse me. Going on into summer, some of these plants, again, are from my fall planting in the little 4 and 6 packs. The top left hand is a flax, beautiful, beautiful blue flax. I planted one little 4-pack of those in the fall, not knowing what exactly they were going to do. But by midsummer, I had to stake them up because they got so tall, probably a good 18 inches tall. And every single day, these guys gave me brand new, beautiful flowers, blue as blue can be. Never a day without them. By mid-afternoon, late afternoon, they kind of fade away. The foliage is there. It's gorgeous. And it just gives you a beautiful show all day long. And by the next morning, another entirely brand new display. We've got some little daisy guys going down on the bottom. They came back nicely for me. And on the right-hand side, I have this plant called acanthus or bear's breeches. I put this in here because the foliage is beautiful. It looks like a pricker bush, but the foliage indeed is not. It's very soft. It's the flower stalk that's dangerous. It is a stalk of thorns, I call it, because that's exactly what it is. But the stalk, the flowers on the stalk are so pretty. They look like little shrimps, pink and white and cream color. But in that little flower are thorns, real bad thorns. So if you brush up against it or grab it to think you're going to get a better look at it, you'll probably get a little poke. So we don't put that out anywhere too close to anybody because it is a kind of a dangerous plant, but it's a beautiful plant and it multiplies. So we have that in there too. After that, we're kind of going into the dog days of summer, and things are starting to come about that I planted again, growth and progress from late fall to the next fall. Excuse me. On the left-hand side, I have some plumbago, blue flowers, and I call these kind of like my ground flowers, ground cover flowers, because they stick around the ground, and they're taking up like the strappy leaves from the tulips and the spring flowers, they're hiding all that we don't want to cut down. So they kind of take over for me, along with the cone flowers. They hide all those strappy leaves. I don't have to cut those spring flowers back. And on the right-hand side are some beautiful burgundy sedum. It doesn't get real tall. It's just a nice ground cover, and it blooms these pink flowers. They're absolutely gorgeous. And I have my little angel girl in there painting away too. She's there every year. Then we come into fall. Yeah, I hate to see summer go, but here it comes anyways. Up in the top left-hand corner is a huge display of blue-eyed Susans. This came from one little cutting from my neighbor. And this is how some of the changes come in my garden from sharing with my friends and my neighbors, my family. And this particular one, I helped her separate in her garden. She gave me a little cutting. And by this time of the following year, this is what I got. So that's a year in my garden. Down below are some new plants. We had to do away with some because of weeds. The weeds are taking away some of my plants. This is the front of my house on the east side. I had a heck of a time with these. They're not noxious weeds, but they're obnoxious weeds. And I couldn't get them under control. So I had to lay down some fabric cloth to smother them out. And in the meantime, I had some space to put in some new plants. So I went with the hydrangeas again, the paniculatas, because it is a very icy area under eave troughs, and I'm very close to the street. So with the snow and the salt and all that, these plants have to take a beating, and they hold up very well. So I put those in. These ladies on the right on the red chair, the morning glories, is another plant from my neighbor lady. One little snipping is what she gave me of these morning glories, and they come back every year, whether you want them to or not. They're beautiful. They kind of spread. We train them, we trellis them, and they are another gift for my garden. In the fall also, this is one of the very first trees I planted for structure in the garden and color. It's a Japanese maple lace leaf. I've had her there for about 15, 18 years. She's been broken a lot due to the space that she's confined to, but she still puts on a beautiful show for me. She starts out in the spring with vibrant red leaves. By midsummer, she's kind of greenish brown, burgundy color. And then in the fall, she explodes with this red that's unbelievable. And by wintertime, excuse me, by winter, when the leaves have fallen, you can see the gorgeous branches twisted and bent, and just beautiful show of branches. And underneath of her are leaves from a eastern redbud that she lives underneath. And the leaves fall into that. They're yellow heart-shaped leaves, beautiful show in that little tiny space. In the west side again, I'm so sorry for this. On the west side of my house, where I've created a shade garden with the structure plants, the trees, the framework, I have little pocket gardens. And within those little pocket gardens, I can have things that require shade, like this Viridia Japanese maple. She is green as green can be all summer. And by fall, she is a display of golden yellow leaves that are absolutely gorgeous. I have her paired up with a purple leaf sand cherry. And behind her, because it's such a small area, but I could create shade, behind her are the spring flowers, the hellebores, jack-in-the-pulpits, the trilliums, a few of them. So this little tree gives me a lot of interest and color all through the year. So I'm going to throw in a couple of little other things like annuals. Shopping day is, look out, count your pennies and make sure the gas tank is full because we're going. And we have a lot of fun. My friends and I, we all get together and travel around to the greenhouses, and they let us in early to say what's going on. So some days we get to take something home early. Depends on what the plants are doing, and of course the time of year, because in the early spring in April, you don't want to take them home just yet. But late April we do, and of course you have to do the in and outside thing until May. But we go through those things and protect them. At night we bring them in, and in the daytime we take them back out. But shopping is, that's a fun day. Some of these are, excuse me, these are some of the things that we bring home. The petunias, I'm sorry, are one of my favorite. My granddaughter Riley is nicknamed Petunia because when she was little, she loved to plant the petunias, and she would spread the seeds around, and we'd, oh my goodness, a month later, here's, oh, what is that? Oh, they're petunias. Or she would make planters and hang them around. Petunias are her thing. And so my granddaughter Riley is nicknamed Petunia. In the front and the middle picture, you can see that Viridia Japanese maple that's green in the summer. And to the right, we have hanging baskets of, I think these are million bells. Again, the petunias. And other little, there's a clematis growing in the back. These are all new things. That clematis in the back was new last year. She made it. So that's one of the progresses in the garden. And more hanging plants, the fuchsias, we have quite a few of those around the back. hanging from the trees. They like the shade. So hanging from these trees that I planted, part of the framework, they do very nicely there. The hummingbirds love them. And so do the butterflies. They'll come around and take a little drink from them. So they're a real big necessity for me in the backyard for the birds. On the side of my house, this is what I call the north garden, my shade garden. I'm very close to the house next door. And there's just a little alleyway down between the two of us, but I'm allowed to garden there. All of it. And years and years ago, when I first started, before I knew much about gardening, I saw on TV this gorgeous viburnum, summer snowflake it was called, and I found one in a greenhouse. I bought it. I brought it home. The tag said 3x5. I thought, oh, perfect, little shrub. Today, it's probably 5x15 or more. It grows nicely up in between those two houses. It's never been trimmed. It's very happy there. It blooms its heart out in the spring, and it is one of my very, very, very favorite trees. I couldn't be happier with it. In the front of it is a mock orange bush, and ahead of that is another Japanese maple. I went nuts with those one year. I've got about 7 of them. But this is one on the north side of the house, does beautifully. And it loves to be underneath that summer snowflake viburnum. I just love them. They're my favorites. One of the changes that come about in my garden are the loss of some trees and shrubs. Last year, I lost my blue spruce standard that took up this entire space. I don't know what happened to it, but it was a fast decline. And so before it spread, the disease, whatever it was, I took it out. And all of a sudden, I had this huge space that was empty, which we can't have that. So it opened up a whole new space to garden. As you can see, the sun is beating from the west. And but it opened up the possibility of new gardening. So I put my little angel water fountain there and went to the greenhouses. I found some plants. Temporary, of course. Temporary is not the word. They came back in 1 year, and I'll show you what happened in 1 year with these little tiny plants that this year you can't see the fairy water garden, the fountain anymore. Let's see if we can get to it. There's some of it. This is about midsummer. To the left is the early summer. To the right is the midsummer. And at this point in the year, those plants are so tall, they are up to my eyeballs, literally. I've had to clear them out, and it's just a good space. I guess they love the space. It's what they call right plant in the right spot, right soil conditions. I tell you, these guys took off, and they were the coneflowers and some dianthuses and little tiny 4-packs of little bellflowers and that. They're all in there, intermingled. But that's a progress on my garden over a course of a year. They made it through the winter and the spring and all the sogginess that comes with the snow in the spring. They love it there. Here's some more close-ups of them. Excuse me. Again, these are the coneflowers and some tradescantias on the bottom left. And you can see the flax. And up to the right, they're not in bloom in this picture, but they're there, are the Henry Eiler coneflowers, black-eyed Susans. And on the bottom are the sedums that came in a little 4-pack. They're not little anymore. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in there because you don't stop. You just don't stop. You have all this empty dirt space and you think, oh, this little tiny plug. I got to fill this space up. So the more you pack in there, and that's part of my garden scheme, I can pack all these little plants in this little tiny space, and if you give them the right conditions, they will grow in my little tiny garden. So I do plant in small spaces, but I start small. I start with good soil conditions. pH is a must. I don't have to fertilize much because when the leaves fall in the fall from the trees, I don't tidy everything up right away and then run to the store for mulch. Not that I'm degrading the mulch, but what I use for conditioning are the leaves, and I leave them there for the winter for protection because it is a brutal area back there in the winter, and they get the nutrients they need, natural nutrients. So by the spring, when the snow has melted, and of course you want to see right away what survived or what's popping up, and you start moving all those wet black leaves, and the nutrients have gone into the soil, and up comes all this beautiful, beautiful garden from that. I don't do too much of the artificial conditioning, and I like the leaves, and the garden just kind of takes care of itself if you start out right. Again, with the small stuff and the leaves, right plant, right place, soil conditions, 3 musts. You got it made. In the front of my house, I have that horrible, horrible weed problem. We're going back to the front of my house in this picture. I had 2 nasty, nasty weeds I could not control. I tried everything to get rid of them, and I couldn't. And they were devouring the roots of my little perennial plants. So I thought, well, it's time to change. And this is where the changes, more changes come in my garden. So I gave one last try at getting rid of the weeds, and I put down the weed cloth on the ground, put the mulch in, smother them out. Well, lo and behold, I had a lot of space to fill up. And so I went to the store and found this huge dianthus. I think this one's Fire Witch. The smell was enough to knock you over. It's beautiful. And it was so big. I've never seen a dianthus this large. It must have been like a 2 or 3 gallon pot. But the space in the front of my house, there was enough space to put it. So home she came. We had to replace more plants. To the left, the same thing with the sedum. So these are part of the changes that my garden goes through in a year. If I lose plants. And weed killing, that's a real big one. Oh, my beauties. These are flowers. Some of them don't make it. Some of them don't come back. And sadly, these 2 beauties didn't come back. I don't know where they went, but they're not here anymore. The yellow one to the left, coneflower, gorgeous in the greenhouse, had to have it. Come on home with me. Oh, put her in the ground, stood there so beautiful, but she didn't come back. This beautiful pink lady to the right is a knockout rose, a new variety called Peachy. Extraordinary fragrance and color, but I put her in the ground. She didn't look too happy. I called Jan. We decided what to do, leave her in the ground for a year, see how she fared. And by spring, she wanted to get out of there. So I dug her up and left her in the pot. She bloomed one more time, and then that was it. She pooped out on me. So these 2 flowers didn't quite make it. Heartbreakers. They're gorgeous, gorgeous. These are some plants from friends again. This is how we acquire some plants. The red trillium on the left was from a friend. I got one this year. I was really, really happy. And the larkspur on the right also was a surprise, a little garden moment. I wasn't expecting her to come back because she's a little tiny mini. And I found her in the Veronica ground cover, the periwinkle Veronica. And up popped this gorgeous little larkspur that my neighbor friend had given me. These are little happy moments in the garden. This is where I get some of my plants. And they survived because they got put in the ground a year ago. This, again, we're going back to my shade garden on the north side of the house, my north garden. This is particularly special to me because it is one of the, in the beginning, it was one of the more difficult areas to garden because it's so small and it gets not much light. But in this area, I put, in a shade, I put my grandmother's ferns and my great aunt's hostas here, and I call it Sisters in the Garden because it was my grandmother and her sisters. These plants came from their gardens a long, long time ago. They've been there quite a while. And then I have a little blue boy back there that I put in, and the Japanese maple. So we all have a little family going on here. To the right, I have another hydrangea, and this one is limelight. So when it's kind of a family type of a garden, the Sisters in the Garden, very special to me, and it does very well there, again, because of the soil conditions, the light, right plant in the right place. And then I cry because after all that beautiful garden stuff, here comes the winter, but we're back to winter again, whether we like it or not. Everything kind of survived from one winter, spring, a hard summer, if there's a heat wave, the loss of plants, beautiful fall, and then we get hit with the snow. But as you can see, everything has survived 1 year in my little tiny space in the city.
All right, thanks, Lynette.
Thank you very much, everybody. Yep. I hope you enjoyed it.
And I think that was great. So just a couple of slides before we get going. I just want to let people know what garden talks are coming up. These are the first Thursdays of the month at noon. October, winter bird feeding, and then November and December, we're going to have our master food preserver do some programming for us. You can register for those through our website. And just a reminder, our fall gala is coming up Saturday, September 18th, 10 to 1 here at the Extension office. And if you do have questions or you can't identify maybe a plant you've lost the tags to, Master Gardeners are in our office every Monday through Friday, 10 to noon. And you can also find us at our website. We also, CCE Genesee has a Facebook page, and we do have a YouTube page where we post our Zoom recordings. And okay, I'm going to have Lynette stop sharing. And does anyone have questions for Lynette? Nothing came in the chat room. So if you want to, you can either put them in through the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask your question. I did have a question for Lynette while we're waiting. You talked about the front where you had the weed problem and you put the landscape fabric down and then you mulched it.
Yes.
When you went to plant, did you remove the landscape fabric?
I dug a hole.
Okay, what you
I
put it
actually
through?
cut a hole in the landscape and put the plant in, and then returned the mulch. Yes.
Okay.
And I had extremely good luck.
Yeah.
The weeds have been smothered out. I have very little tiny weeds I go along and pull out. So that was a success.
Yeah, because sometimes landscape fabric works and sometimes the weeds just grow on top of the mulch, on top of the landscape fabric.
I got lucky and the plant survived.
Good. All right, great. Does anybody else? Oh, there's a couple of chat questions, so let me look. Can we get a copy of the recording? Kathleen, it'll be up on our YouTube page, so you can watch it again as often as you want. And thank you, Lynette. A couple of thank yous. So, yeah, any questions for Lynette? Lynette has a lovely little garden, and it's a great way to see how folks can garden in a small space. And I think Lynette just to change her plants around so she can go buy new plants in the spring. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
We all like to do that. So
there's so many different types of gardens that I love and I want. And the only way I can get them is to remove what I've already planted and start the next year with something new. And I give away a lot of stuff because I
Yeah.
want different gardens.
And
That's how I get them.
I can't believe you still have 7 Japanese
I
maples?
still do. Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Well, there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I do like what you mentioned about letting your leaves stay in the garden through the winter. That is great way to add natural organic matter.
Absolutely.
And I'll put a plug in for our beneficial insects because now I'm all about helping out our beneficial insects. But a lot of them need that leaf cover to overwinter. It helps insulate them too.
It does.
And a number of our butterflies and moth caterpillars, they actually use the leaf litter to overwinter at. So if you're putting all that out to the curb, you're getting rid of all your beneficial insects, and next year's crop of potentially butterflies and moths that our birds need and we like to see in our garden. So
I also use a little compost in the spring, or when I'm planting something new, I'll add a little store-bought manure compost because I can't make it myself. And that seems to work pretty well.
yeah.
But that's the only fertilizer I have to give in during the spring.
All right. So
that seems to work the best for me.
We did have one question come in, Lynette.
Okay.
If you have a bed with so many roots, can you just dig through to plant? Or sometimes it's very hard to plant and she's worried about killing something when she disturbs it.
The roots? Yes. Yeah. I won't dig out past the tree line of a plant. I won't dig out farther than the plant itself. I will go straight down and then in. But I'm very aware of the root system when I'm digging because they do intermingle.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. Almost like a root pruning kind of a thing for the other plants. But when I am digging something up, I go shallow inward to the plant root ball itself.
All right. So it looks like Kathleen has river birches that she wants to plant under. So what about planting under? I don't think you plant under your Japanese maples, really, do you?
No, just that plumbago works really well under there, and the Veronica, the little spreading Veronicas.
So some of the ground covers do better. Yeah. So Kathleen, I know when I've underplanted trees, I do try to go more out towards the drip line because, of course, then you have shade issues. But also trees suck up a lot of water. So you actually want to use plants that are going to be more almost drought tolerant.
Absolutely.
Because
that would be the plumbago.
Yeah.
Beautiful blue flowers in the fall. And then the leaves turn a little red towards winter too. And again, like I know it's a creeping Jenny but those type of creepers on the ground, sedums underneath the trees, they all work well for me.
Yeah. So
like you say, they don't need the water.
Yeah, you definitely, because I know
the root space
with the trees, especially if you're trying to underplant, because I've underplanted under pine trees that I inherited that were limbed up. You want to use things that can tolerate drier conditions because the trees are basically sucking up as much water as they can. Mm-hmm. And if you are underplanting, I also do like to start with as small of a plant as I can, so you don't have to dig a big hole for those root balls because it's very hard to get in. And like Lynette said, I would add some compost to the hole initially and maybe even do a little top dressing with compost. That'll help both the plants and the tree.
Another plant that works well under those trees are the miniature hostas.
Right.
And they're full of color too.
Yeah.
They do require root space, but not that much if you get the minis, those great big blue boy ones. They're huge. They take up a lot of ground, but the little tiny mini mouse ear type of hostas work well under the trees. I have those under there too.
And lots of times we forget that a lot of our foliage plants offer you a different sort of color.
Pineapple one is the yellow under there. It's gorgeous, but it's small.
It is small. Yeah. Any other questions for Lynette? That was a great question. Thank you, Kathleen. All right. So I don't see any more questions coming in. And if you do, you can always send them out to the Master Gardeners if you think of something later. So I think we'll end today. I just again want to thank Lynette for giving us a rundown on her beautiful little city garden. And hopefully we'll see many of you folks, if not at the gala in October, online. All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. All right. I just need to stop.